Good morning, gardeners. It's Sunday, July 11th, and today's video is the video that so many of you have asked for. Yes, today is my official fig tour, the complete fig tour of every single fig variety growing on my property. If you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing and hitting the bell to receive new video notifications, and check out our Amazon storefront and spread shop in the video description for a list of the gardening products I use and awesome custom designed apparel and other gear. Your support is greatly appreciated. Now, my fig tour is a little late this season, and that's because back on April 3rd, we received a 28-degree hard freeze. Under normal conditions, when your fig trees are dormant, 28 degrees Fahrenheit is no problem for a dormant fig tree. The problem is this hard freeze was historic. We got this 28-degree hard freeze after our 90% frost date. So usually hard freezes are done about 3 weeks beforehand. So this hard freeze came when I had probably about 6 to 12 inches of brand new growth on all of my fig trees that are espaliered that I have back behind me. So they got cooked. They got set back mercilessly, totally burnt back. Most of my cordons even had to be replaced to an extent, and I'll link to a video above where I showed you how I pruned off all of the dead wood and replaced the cordons. So all of my in-ground fig trees that are more than a year old didn't have fruit on them for the longest time, but now they're finally caught up to a point where I'm comfortable showing you what they look like for the season. So we will begin with those in-ground fig trees right now. This fig tree right here is my Smith fig tree. It's the second fig tree that I ever rooted from cutting, and it has bushed out tremendously. Smith is a very vigorous grower. One of the nice things about Smith is it's actually a fairly early fig, but since it got set back at least 6 weeks this year, it only is starting to get some decent sized figlets on it, and you can see it right here. So Smith is a very prolific producer. There will be figs at every single node with just the perfect node spacing. It's a great grower for people that live in humid southern climates, and that's because it resists splitting pretty well. The water does dilute the flavor, but it's not a fig that splits easily. And you'll see I had to reestablish cordons on my Smith fig tree. Under normal circumstances, this Smith would probably be about 3 weeks away from ripening, but because it's so set back, it's probably more like 2 months away from ripening. But we'll eventually get fruit off of it because, like I said, it is one of the earlier varieties. The next fig tree is my Coll de Dama Noir. This is the first fig cutting that ever rooted for me, and this tree is just awesome. Look at it. It is towering over my fence. It's probably 8 feet tall, and that is despite how much dieback it got. I had to replace the cordons on this tree because it got burnt back in that late hard freeze. You can see where I had to cut off the old dead wood and reestablish a new cordon. Now, the problem with this tree is because it puts so much energy into vigor to recover from the freeze, it doesn't have a lot of fruit on it yet. It's just starting to get little figlets on it there, and it has some larger figlets up here. So it has some figlets up here as well. You'll see all of the upper growth does have figlets on it. Now, the problem is Coll de Dama Noir is it's a later season fig. I wouldn't say it's the latest, but it is on the late side. So I'm probably not going to get ripe figs off this tree until late September at this rate, which is a real shame because it's a phenomenal fig. Normally I'd be looking at figs in late August, early September, but that freeze just really set us back. My next fig tree is my Coll de Dama Blanc, and that is right next to the Coll de Dama Noir over here. So you can see how differently they chose to grow. Now, my Coll de Dama Blanc didn't put as much energy into vigor, which is funny because they were equally vigorous last year. They grew in an identical pattern, same growth habit, same height. But what's interesting about the Coll de Dama Blanc is it just decided to put more energy into fruiting. So on my Coll de Dama Blanc, I have some really nice larger figs on it. So I probably will get figs off this tree in early September. It's way ahead of the Coll de Dama Noir. So don't for a minute think that Coll de Dama Blanc is less vigorous than Coll de Dama Noir. It isn't. They are about equal. They are both great growers. But for some reason, this individual tree, in its own unique personality, just like people, it decided that it was going to put a ton of its early energy into fruit. Look how much fruit is on this tree. So despite that really late freeze that burned it back and its terribly late start, it probably is going to be a fruitful year for this tree. So I don't mind that it didn't grow so large because I can't eat the leaves and I can't eat the wood. And then next up is the fig tree that I just can't stop praising, and that's the Italian 258. This is the fig tree that does it all. Check out the Italian 258 next to my Coll de Blanc and my Coll de Noir. It is just a monster. It is probably my most vigorous grower, and despite all of the energy that it put into growing, even though it got burnt back badly in that freeze, look at all of the large figs on here. So I'm going to get fruit off of this tree probably in early September, maybe even in August, because the fruit is so large. I don't know why this tree is so fruitful. I don't know why it's incredible. It's so incredible. I don't know why it can put so much energy into growing fruit and growing vigor. I've never seen a fig that is this amazing. There are large figs everywhere, despite the horrible late freeze. I mean, this thing got cooked. It got burnt back to the cordons. I had to reestablish the cordons here. I lost all of that wood, all my old cordons in the freeze. I had to cut it off. You can see this was the old cordon down here. I had to abandon it because it got killed back in the freeze. And yet, despite that, the tree is just doing fantastic. It is going to be behind where it could have been. I probably could have gotten figs off of this tree in early August if it weren't for that freeze. This is just one of the best varieties of figs out there. Then we have the Bordissot Blanca Negra. This is a beautiful fig. It's a delicious fig, but it's by far the least vigorous of all the figs here. Here you can see how small that tree is compared to my Martinenca Rimada and compared to the Italian 258 and all of the other ones. Now last year it was the least vigorous of the bunch. It only grew a cordon on the left side. It didn't really grow its right cordon very well. And I finally have a branch that I was able to pull down and make a cordon, a low cordon for this tree. But you can see it's having a rough year. It also hasn't fruited yet. I'm just starting to get the double bumps at the nodes, which will be figs. So there's a decent chance that I won't get any fruit at all off of this fig. These figs that are forming now just are probably too late. And it's a shame because this is a really delicious fig. But this is probably the one that I'm most upset about because that late freeze probably ruined its season. However, the tree is healthy, so there's hope for it for next year. Then we have my Martinenca Rimada. This is the latest fig that I have in my collection. This thing takes seemingly forever to ripen, and that late freeze really set it back. It did damage the wood. I'm starting to get some figlets on it now. There's some larger figlets on this branch right here. You can see them right here. You can just start to make out the variegated striping on the figs. It's a beautiful fig. It's a tasty fig. It is a rain-resistant fig, but these other branches are just starting to get double bumps on them. So chances are I will not be getting much, if any, fruit off of this tree. Even though it does have a couple of larger figs on it, they just take so long to ripen. You can see there are double bumps all over the nodes. But by the time these form figlets and they're ready to eat, my growing season will probably be over, or it'll just be so far into October that it won't be sufficiently warm enough. So unfortunately, this may be a lost year for the Martinenca Rimada. We'll see. And my final in-ground fig tree that is a couple of seasons old is my standard Celeste fig tree, which is pretty much a must-have anywhere in the South because of the rain resistance and humidity tolerance of the figs. Now, normally this is probably my earliest fig. This is a fig that you can eat and harvest in July when things go well. However, my front yard faces due north, so this fig tree is fully exposed to the north wind, and as a result, this tree suffered more damage than any of the fig trees in my south-facing backyard. I had to cut this tree back very heavily, and it's really only just starting to recover, and I'm only just starting to get some figs on it now. You can see in here it is forming figlets. There are figs everywhere you look on the tree, but man, is it just set back. And that's a shame because, like I said, I would normally be on the cusp of picking some figs off of this tree, but that late freeze just wrecked it. which is a real shame. I'm pretty upset about it, but luckily I do have a couple other trees that are early producers and will hopefully pick up the slack. What is pretty cool though is that my banana is once again fruiting, and I have a really nice bunch of North Carolina grown bananas growing in my front yard. So that's definitely a pretty cool little showpiece. Now on to my next crop of in-ground fig trees. These are the fig trees that I just planted in April, and as you can see I have a bunch of posts here because I'll be growing them espalier just like my other fig trees. Now because these fig trees started off in containers, I had them up against my house when we got hit by that late hard freeze in April, so the house protected them from freezing. So they're actually further along. And this right here is my Coll de Dama Gris fig tree. As you can see, it is loaded up with figs. And what's really amazing with all of these fig trees that I'm going to show you and their production is they started off as single fig trees that were headed about 14 inches earlier in the season. I cut these down just to a nub, and they've put on all this growth and all of those figs despite how hard pruned they were in order to get this form. So just look at the production. Really impressed, and we'll soon be trellising them into low cordons as well. The next fig variety is Golden Dawn. This was a very rare fig tree that I acquired last year. I may be one of the only people on earth that has this tree, and I haven't shared it yet. The first figs that I got off the tree last year were delicious and rain resistant and very unique. However, it was a very stingy producer, and it seems like that it's going to continue to do this into the next season. It has a fig there. It has a couple of bumps forming up at the nodes. It has some figlets that are just starting on the top of the tree. Here's a couple of figs down here. Here's a couple more figs over here. They're really hard to find because they're scattered about. Here's another one right here. I think the last time I checked there was only about 7 or 8 figs on this entire tree. But like I said, it is producing up high. I think this is just one of those varieties that's going to take a couple of seasons to get going. I think next season is probably going to be the really fruitful season for this tree. The next fig tree is my white Madeira #1, easily one of my favorite figs of all time. You can see it next to the Golden Dawn, how much more vigorous the Golden Dawn is, but that's because the white Madeira decided it was going to fruit like crazy. Look at all of the figs on this tree. And again, this came back from being completely headed. And if you're wondering why there are all these organza bags on this tree of different colors, that's because this is one of the fig trees that I hand pollinated as an experiment, which I will link to above. So that's why some of them are covered with varying color bags. The white means that they were hand pollinated using just dry pollen. The orange or the yellow means that they were pollinated with an injection solution. So just look at all of the figs on that tree. Pretty awesome. Next up is the Carr Fig. The Carr Fig I'm really liking. It's similar to a Black Mission, but better. It's larger and more flavorful with a more amber interior. And this put a lot of energy into vigor. So because it put so much energy into vigor, it didn't fruit heavily. That seems to be a common theme when it decides to really heavily bush out its first year. But you can see that it still has a good amount of figs on it. So we will get figs off of this tree. Last year, this fig tree fruited very heavily. You can see there's some figs down there as well. It fruited very heavily for me, so I know it has a lot of potential to fruit well for me. However, this year, because it's its first year in ground, it just decided to put more of its energy into roots and green growth instead. That fig tree in the center right there is my Sen Jaume Gran. You can see how much smaller it is compared to the other fig trees, but that's because it really put a lot of energy into setting fruits. And that's great because it set very few for me last year, and it was one of the greatest figs I've ever tasted in my entire life. Look at the figs on this tree. They're large, they are awesome. You can see how big they're getting already. And this is a later fig and it has a long hang time, so I'm glad to see that they're so large so early in the year. And again, this is part of my fig pollinating experiment as well. I really hope I can use this as a parent fig tree for breeding because the fruits are just so exceptional. And my last in-ground fig tree is my Coll de Dama Gegantina. Just like Italian 258, I think this is one of those fig trees that is going to do it all. The figs are prolific, they are huge, the tree is a strong grower. You can see how much energy it's put into vigor, but despite how much energy it put into vigor, look at how many figs are on this tree. They are everywhere. And again, this was just a 14-inch tall nub when I planted this in April. It's incredibly impressive, and it's so impressed am I that I'm using this as one of my fig breeding experiments as well. This would be one of my first choices because the figs on this tree are about 100 grams in size, and they have all of the quality of the Coll de Dame. Usually it's so hard to find a fig that's large with great flavor, and these figs are huge and taste almost every bit as good as a Coll de Dame Blanc. Now that I've showed you all of my in-ground fig trees, we're going to move on to my container fig trees. And we're going to start with my second year fig trees that I moved into those awesome number 15 nursery pots that I found over the winter. And we will start with Pastiliere. Now, Pastiliere is known to drop its crop its first at least 2 seasons. And as you can see, it is doing so here. The ground has just been littered with the fallen figs, and they are still aborting as we speak. You can see this fig right here is aborting. It's going to pop right off. It's shriveled and spongy and dried. It almost feels like a Capra fig or an unpollinated female fig. However, this variety is just supposed to take 3 or 4 years to hold its crop. So I'm sure it will eventually work out. It's known to be a very early fig. However, it looks like I won't be getting any fruit off of the tree this year. And you can see how many figs are still on this tree, even though I've probably lost about 60% of them. The production on this variety was just insane about a month ago before the figs started dropping. Just really impressive. Next up is my Black Madeira KK tree. And this variety has been giving me trouble for the 3 years that I've owned it. It's very late, and it really responds poorly to the humidity and the rain in my climate. It tends to split all over the place. And I was finally having a great year. It's had such poor vigor every single year, but this year it finally decided to grow and set a whole bunch of fruit. But as luck would have it, it got hit by a case of rust because we got 11 inches of rain in June, and it responded by dropping about half the leaves on the tree. Just look at the insane amount of fruit on this tree. It's an incredible producer, but boy is it finicky. Because the figs are large, I'm hoping I'll actually get my first ever decent crop off of this tree. Because it is a good fig, I would just say it's a bit overrated. Don't come after me, Black Madeira fans. It's a good fig, it just doesn't perform very well for me in the coastal south. Next up is my UCR 271-1 Capra Fig, which is also called Saleeb. This is where I harvested my pollen from the Profici crop, which is the Breba on the fig tree. Now I only have just a couple of main crop figs that's left on here. This is where the female wasp would prefer to go and start a new colony, but sometimes they get confused and they wind up in the female figs instead and pollinate them. So I have just a handful of main crop on here. It's a really straggly tree, but that's because it has to be pruned differently because you really want the Breba crop to harvest the pollen, as we don't have the fig wasp here in North Carolina. Then we have my reverted Coll de Dame Rimada. It's lost its variegated striping, but it still has all the same size, flavor, and just the wonderful texture of the Coll de Dames. Look at this thing, how many figs are on this tree. They're all huge. They all look great. I'm going to get a really nice harvest off of this tree. And this is a very split resistant variety. It handles my humidity and my rain well for a fig. You could also see how nice the caliper of this tree is. It also has a gorgeous form. If you want a beautiful container fig, look no further than the Coll de Dame varieties. They're just gorgeous. Now I can't wait to show you my Ronde de Bordeaux fig tree. Now I wouldn't say Ronde de Bordeaux is my favorite fig by any stretch. It actually handles my climate pretty poorly and has a really bad problem with an open eye and splitting. But this is the must-have fig for every single fig grower, and that's because of its earliness. This has me so excited because it's only July 11th and I have a number of figs on this tree that are ripening. They are already getting soft. I could honestly probably pick one of these, and I will at the end of this video just for fun. So I have 3 of them that are just about ready there. And then if you walk around the tree, you'll see I have another one that'll probably be ready in another 2 days. And this one will probably be ready in 3 days. So I have at least 5 figs on this tree. that are swelling. So if you want a July 15th fig and you live in a warmer southern climate, look no further than the Ronde de Bordeaux. If you live up north and you have a shorter season, this is one of the figs that will ripen main crop for you. They're a very good fig. Like I said, they don't handle the rain very well. If you could keep the tree dry, the figs will do better. And always cover them in organza bags, because the problem is that eye can really open up and be a problem and let pests in. My next fig tree is my São Miguel Roxo, aka Azores Dark. And you can see how beautiful my other fig trees are, but look at this. And the reason why it's so stunted is because it's grafted to Chicago Hardy. I strongly discourage grafting fig trees. It is, in my opinion, a very bad practice to do, and that is because sometimes they just don't take very well, but most of all, fig trees have a tendency to die back to the roots, and if they die back, you will lose all of your scion wood. So if you like grafting fig trees and your trees die back, you just lost all of your varieties. It's a big mistake, in my opinion. Always put the fig tree on their own roots. So if they get dieback, they come back and you don't lose your entire collection. Now it does have a nice amount of fruit on it, but because it's grafted, it's really struggling. So this winter I am going to take some cuttings from this tree and I'm going to repropagate it so I can have a copy on its own roots and I can get rid of this graft. It is a nice graft, but it just isn't working out. This fig tree right here is my Olympian fig tree. This is one of the most overlooked fig trees out there because it's so common and it's quote-unquote just an English brown turkey, but man is it fantastic. The figs are huge, they're fairly early, they're incredibly prolific. It's known to be a fairly cold-hardy tree because the mother tree comes from Olympia, Washington, hence the name. Just look at the production on this tree. Just incredible. Figs as far as the eye can see, and most of these will start ripening for me in August. This is not my earliest fig tree, but it is one of the earliest. Just look at the crazy production. Just ridiculous. Then over here we have my Violette de Bordeaux fig tree. This was the first fig tree I ever purchased. I purchased it as a tissue culture from Burpee, and it has struggled for me every single season. Every year it's had a problem. And I haven't gotten a lot of fruit off of it despite how heavily it sets fruit. But this year I think I'm finally going to have my first good season. The tree is behaving well and you can see how much fruit is on this tree. So I'm hoping I'll finally be able to get a good harvest off this tree instead of only having a couple of figs and then have the rest of the tree either drop its figs or not ripen properly. You'll see every now and again you get a fig that's a dud right here. I can't tell you why that one opened up and split, but it's so loaded with figs, it doesn't really matter. So this year it's doing pretty well. The next fig tree I have right here is Blava Campanera. Now I bought fig cuttings from Harvey in January of 2020, and they took a while for me to root, but it eventually did root. But because the tree had such a slow start, it didn't get to ripen its fruit last season. However, this season will be a different story. Look at the production on this tree. Very impressed. Fruit as far as the eye can see. I mean, look at this. How can you get that much fruit on a fig tree this small? It's got to be the fertilizing. It's why I recommend my fertilizing routine. I really recommend the phosphorus heavy fertilizing routine. So this tree is doing great. It is absurdly laden with fruit, and I hope to have my first fig off of it soon. Then over here I have Galicia Negra. This was a late purchase for me last year, so I only got 1 or 2 figs off of it, and they ripened when it was too cool. A lot of people say that this fig tree is that it takes a while to fruit, but I had good luck last season, and I'm having even better luck this season. You can see all of the fruit on here, just loaded for bear. So really happy for that. There's some couple of fruits here as well. So hopefully I will be able to review this fig more completely this season. The fig tree right here is the Godfather Fig. This is one of the fig trees that was in the movie The Godfather. That's why it's named what it is. So that's a pretty awesome lineage to have. Again, I got this late last year, so I didn't get any fruit off of the tree. Well, I got only 1 or 2 fruits off the tree, and they ripened in the cool weather, so I didn't want to review it. However, this season they are on schedule, so As you can see, plenty of fruit, and I should be able to better analyze this fig tree this season. Then over here I have a grafted Coll de Gegantina. I grafted this myself onto Marseilles Black VS rootstock. It was doing great earlier in the season, but it got hit with a horrible case of rust when we got 11 inches of rain in June. This suffered even worse than my Black Madeira. But despite that, it still has a lot of fruits on it. Fruits everywhere, looking really good. But I didn't pay a lot of attention to this tree because it's an extra, since I already have a Coll de Gegantina in ground. So this will give me some nice supplemental figs, and I may offer this tree eventually to somebody locally because, like I said, it is a copy. I just wanted to make sure that my in-ground one established first before I gave this one up. My next variety is Cotio Verdeal. Not a lot of figs on this tree this season, and it didn't bear for me heavily last season either. I think I only got like 2 figs off of it. I think this is another one of those slow starters, so I pruned it very aggressively, and I am getting some figs on it. It definitely is producing more. However, I think this is one of those varieties that probably needs about 3 seasons, maybe 4, to really get going. Like I said, it's doing well. It's very healthy. It does have figs on it. And I didn't get to analyze it last year because I got it so late, so I hope to be able to give it a better taste review this year. Then this tree right here is Noire de Barbentane. This tree took cold damage last year, and it's been kind of a slow grower because of the damage. However, I did get a few fruits off of it last year, and it was nice. It was very similar to Black Madeira, but I got it too late in the season to give it an honest review. Now this year it's setting a good amount of fruits. It's actually, the production's really nice, and that's despite the cold damage that's on the trunk. You can see how kind of injured the trunk is right there. But despite that injury, it's doing pretty well. I may decide to repropagate it for myself because of the injury to the trunk. But I'm excited to give this a better taste and possibly a review this season. The fig tree right here is a tree that I so badly want to work out. It's called UCR 184-15 Strawberry Teardrop. And the UCR stands for University California Riverside. Now last year this had 100% fruit drop. It dropped every single one, and I'm starting to see the figs, they're dropping off again. They're spongy, they're hollow, and I have a feeling this may be a Smyrna variety. However, I'm crossing my fingers, and I'm hoping that this is just one of those varieties that'll take a couple of seasons to fruit, because I've seen videos of this fig, and the fruit is just huge. It looks delicious, and just look how prolific this fig tree is. Look at the figs everywhere. Oh, I want this to work out so badly. In the videos, it just looks so delicious and syrupy, but the only person that I could find videos on this fig is Harvey, and he lives in a place that has the fig wasp. So it's really not possible to find out if this is common or Smyrna, so I'm going to hold on to this for at least one more year to see if it'll hold its figs. I'm hoping it will this season, keep a couple, but we'll find out. The next variety is Negra de Agde. This variety looks to just load up with figs. And as you can see, it has incredible production, figs as far as the eye can see. These figs right here actually may be engaging in their 3rd swelling process. It seems that this is one of the earlier figs. Last year, it seemed like a very light berry fig, almost kind of fruity, similar to a Black Mission. It wasn't my favorite, but I saw people rave about this fig and say it gets better with age, so I'm hoping it'll develop a more syrupy interior as it gets older. This is only its 2nd season, but just look at that production. I think this is a really good option for people in shorter season climates that want a fresh, lighter berry fig. This fig tree right here is Colonel Littman's Black Cross. I received it very late last year, so it didn't have nearly enough time to fruit for me. It set fruit, but they didn't have a prayer of ripening. And unfortunately, this is one of the few container trees that got injured in my April 3rd hard freeze. You can see it has some cold damage up top. It really got burnt, which is surprising because it's up against my house. All of this wood is showing desiccation right there. It's all a little bit dried out. And I guess because of the injury, it didn't set a whole lot of fruit. It has some fruit here, but it looks like it has some rust spots on it. There's some more fruit that's intermittently scattered above the tree or around the tree. And it's a shame because last year when this tree was completely healthy, it was absolutely loaded with fruit. It was just too late of an arrival in my garden. So I'm hoping that I get something off of this tree, but it's probably going to have to be heavily pruned, and it's just probably going to have to restart again for me next season, unfortunately. This fig tree right here is called 3N Prato, and the only record I could find of this tree was from Harvey. His fig tree tasting videos looked absolutely delicious, and I took a risk on it despite not knowing if it would be common or Smyrna. It dropped 100% of its crop last year, and it's dropped almost all of its figs this year again. This tree was loaded, but every single fig has turned into this mess right here and fallen. You can see all of the figs all over the ground that are littering the ground. They all fell off of this tree. However, I do have a hope because I have this one fig right here that is swelling, which is very interesting. I'm hoping this is just like Pastiliere, which just takes a few years to hold its fruit. And the reason why I'm optimistic is I put 3 or 4 organza bags on this tree where I injected some of the Carr Fig solution that I made, and all of those figs dropped. So there's a chance that this is a common fig, and it just naturally aborts all of its figs when it's young, whether it is pollinated or not. So the fact that my figs that I hand pollinated still fell off, that actually has me a little bit optimistic. So I'm going to hold on to this tree for at least another season after that and see if this one pans out. This variety of fig right here I received from a friend. It is called Division Unknown. I had never heard of it, but I can't turn down a free fig tree. I received it extremely late last year. I believe it is from Oregon, and it's just an unknown variety growing somewhere in a subdivision there, hence the name. And boy, is this thing prolific. Because the tree I received so late last year, it took a bunch of cold damage, and despite the cold damage, it recovered completely, and it has just set a mad, crazy amount of figs. I mean, just look at them. They're everywhere. So chances are this is a more common variety where the name has just been lost. So I doubt it's a unique variety. However, it sure is a great producer, so we'll see what it gives for me. Then we have the regular standard old Chicago Hardy. Probably my least favorite fig in my entire collection. I keep it around because it tends to be very early. Chicago Hardy seems to be one of the only figs that I would consider dwarfing, and that's why my San Miguel Roxo that's grafted onto its rootstock is probably performing so poorly. There's just something about this tree that just doesn't grow very well. And last year it actually was pretty prolific and it ripened very early, so I kept it around. But this year the figs just don't seem to be doing well on it. This is near the top of my Coll list. I've been messing around with it for 3 years, and it's never impressed me, and I've always thought the flavor was bland. But, well, you know, we'll give it another chance. We'll see how it handles this season. Then this fig tree right here is the Marseilles Black VS, which is very similar to the Chicago Hardy in terms of taste, but it has a much better growth habit. It is much more vigorous. Now this got completely killed back to the ground, despite being a quote-unquote cold hardy Mount Etna type. Last year it got killed back to the ground. It was one of only 2 figs that did, despite its claimed cold hardiness, so I got nothing off of it last year. However, it has come back from the roots with this new trunk, and it's doing really well this year. So we'll see how it performs this year. I'm hoping that the fruit quality improves some because it is a very prolific bearer and it's virtually rainproof. Then this fig tree over here is another trial called Meteorito. Everybody seems to think this is a Smyrna, and mine dropped all of its figs last year. And I have a feeling it probably will this year, although it hasn't dropped a single one yet. And let's assume it doesn't. Or even if it does, I mean, look how prolific this thing is. So if you have the fig wasp, this thing is just a must-have because look at the production. It is just madness. Now, one of the cool things is I did inject a couple of my figs with my pollination solution, and those are these 3 figs right here. And what's interesting about it is that all 3 of those figs are larger than any other of the figs on this tree. They swelled after I injected them. None of the other ones, even the 4th fig, I injected 4 of them, and this one's larger than all the rest too. So it has me optimistic that my hand pollination worked, because the 4 that I injected are so much larger than all the rest on the tree. So we'll see if I am able to at least keep those 4 figs that I hand pollinated, and maybe we'll cross our fingers and hope that this tree is common. This fig tree right here is called Yolo Bypass. This was a wild seedling found growing in the Yolo Bypass region of California, and it was discovered by our Figs members last year that it is in fact common. So I received 2 cuttings last year. They were little tiny cuttings, but they rooted almost immediately. These were some of the easiest rooting cuttings that I've ever grown, and the vigor is just off the charts. This thing is already over 5 feet tall, and it's getting little figlets right here. And I also have 1 decent sized fig down here. So it's pretty clear that it's first year. It likes to put its energy into vigor. So I don't know if I'll actually get to eat any figs off of this tree this season. However, it definitely will set figlets, and really happy with the vigor so far. So we'll see how it does long term. Another variety I'm excited to try is Cavalieri. This is a new cutting that I received over the winter, and the tree is doing very well. It set some very nice large figs. So this seems to want to fruit early, which is really great. It has fruits all along the nodes. So really excited to try this variety, and there's a good chance I'll be able to harvest a couple of figs off this tree. My next variety right here is one I received from Harvey. It is called Grigio. I bought this simply because I liked the way it looked on his videos. And as you can see, this baby is loaded up with figs, and that's despite the fact that it didn't root for me until February. So it started producing immediately. Really thrilled with both the vigor and production on this early tree. My next fig tree is one that I'm most excited about, and that's because it was so hard for me to get and actually root, and that is Bass's favorite fig. This is one that is still pretty rare in the fig community, and it's notoriously difficult to root, so they say, but I was able to root a cutting, and I'm happy to say it's already fruiting for me. This is probably a later season fig because from what I've seen, the figs are very large on it, so I don't know if they'll ripen well for me. It's very first year. However, this is definitely one I'm going to hold on to for the long term. I've heard mixed reviews about its performance in the rain, but I'm going to hold on to this no matter what, I think. I think I have to take back my comment about the Yolo Bypass Fig cuttings being the easiest I ever rooted. I think they're the second easiest. The easiest goes to this variety called Purpura Verde that I got from Brian M. off of FigBid. He gave me 3 cuttings, and all 3 of them rooted probably within 2 weeks with huge sets of roots. And it's also incredibly vigorous, and the fruits are just enormous. I can't believe how fast they rooted, how fast the tree has grown, and how fast it's fruited. This is probably the fastest growing, or rooting, growing, and producing fig that I've ever seen. And it is super prolific. I have no idea how good the fruit is going to be, but I'm really excited to try because there's very little info on this fig. This variety is another new variety that I'm excited to try. It is Coll Curt Negra. I received this from a friend, and it's grown very, very well. It is a very, very healthy tree, and it's starting to get its first couple of figs. There's a fig there. Looks like this guy right here aborted, unfortunately. There's a couple of figlets forming here and here. So whether we'll get any ripe fruit this year, I don't know. But this is definitely a long-term investment because the fruit, from what I've seen, seems to look so good. This variety has been the bane of my existence since I started trying to grow it 3 years ago. It's called Long Day Out. I bought cuttings of this fig tree about 3 years ago. All of the cuttings failed. I bought another set of cuttings last year. All of the cuttings failed. And then I was given a tree last year. That tree was the only fig tree I've ever transplanted that died. And then this is my 4th attempt. This is an air layer I got from a friend over the winter. And it did well when it was in its little half-gallon pot, but it hasn't grown one single bit since I transplanted it. It has done nothing. It is exactly the same as it was back in last December. And I can't explain why. It is alive. The wood still feels good, but I don't know what it's doing. I don't know if it's going to survive. I don't know if the roots are going to rot. I'm just sitting. I'm just allowing it to sit and do its thing, and I'm crossing my fingers, and I'm hoping that the 4th try is the charm. But there is a good chance that I may fail 4 times on this fig variety. I have no idea what the problem is. I received cuttings from this tree from a friend in Wilmington. This is Robert's Golden Rainbow. This was a very vigorous grower, and the figs on it, very large figs for only being a few months old. I'm excited to try this fig. I've never been a big fan of honey figs. This is the only honey fig I've ever really been excited for because the fruits are so large. And you can just see there are fruits everywhere. Again, this whole tree is only something like maybe 4 months old. I got the cuttings very late, and it's doing this well already and fruiting already. So super early, super vigorous. We'll see what the fruit tastes like. And my last new variety is a variety called WXC019 that I received from a friend. It is an experimental variety. I don't really know anything about it. They're being trialed across the country to see if they're common. The reason why there's mulch bags up against them is because of Tropical Storm Elsa. I used the mulch bags to prop it up. Now, I am happy to say that it does have some figs on it. So I may be able to find out this year if it's common, if the figs do set and hold for me, but we'll find out. It's a very young seedling, or it's a very young cutting, rather, so we'll see how it grows long term. Then over here I have 5 fig trees that were on my cull list from the winter that I was going to throw out, but I decided to hold on to just to perform experiments on. I haven't really given these any fertilizer or anything other than water and maybe 2 feedings just to keep them barely alive. And I'm using a couple of these for hand pollination experiments because I'm almost positive that several of them are Smyrna. And they are called Dama de Chiutat, Laterola Italian Honey, Sangue di Drago Buccia Marrone, Sangue di Drago Rosso, and Sinisi. So there is a chance that maybe the Sinisi will hold a fruit. I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure the 2 Sangue di Dragos are certainly Smyrna, and they're already all dropping their figs. However, what's interesting is I decided to inject a couple 2 figs with my hand pollinating solution, and I'm happy to say that all of the other ones, the figs have all dropped around it, but these 2 have swollen to be large. So this is making me incredibly optimistic on my hand pollination trials, that only those 2 have held in a big cluster of 5 or 6 fruits and the others have dropped. Now right here I have a few old cuttings that I just haven't given up hope on because I never give up hope with figs, and it paid off with my Sanguinato. I ordered this cutting from Harvey in January, mid-January. This has been in a pot since late January, and it just decided that it was going to root about 3 weeks ago out of nowhere. I thought for sure it was a goner, that it was rotten. I can't believe it. This is almost 6 months of waiting, and it decided to come alive. So it does look like I will be able to soon transplant a Sanguinato, but I'm not going to count my chickens before they hatch. Then over here, I have another cutting that I received from a friend, and it was such a pencil thin cutting, I didn't think it was going to make it. And again, this has been in this container for probably about 4 months. This is called, I don't even know what it's called. It's called Kelly Unknown. I know nothing about it. I thought for sure it was rotten, but it looks like it just sent up some kind of little green spear right here. So while the top may have desiccated, it may have rooted and it's sending a new trunk from underground. So we'll see if that does anything. Looks like one of my San Miguel Roxos that I tried to propagate may also break ground. If that does well, I may replace my current tree with that so I can get rid of the grafted tree. And as promised, we're going to shoot for our very first fig taste test of the year, because I think these, at least 2 of these Ronde de Bordeaux, they could probably use another day, but I don't want to risk an afternoon thunderstorm ruining my figs. So I'm going to, because we do have a chance of rain, so I'm going to pull 1 and 2 off, so they both feel really nice and soft. Then we're going to place these organza bags that we just removed over these other figs that are just starting to turn. And look at those 2 beautiful figs right there. Just look at them. Very first figs of the year. Boy, it feels strange to be taste testing a fig. I haven't had one in so long. And I think these Ronde de Bordeaux, like I said, definitely could have used another day, but I don't want to risk thunderstorms this afternoon because we might get them, and that would ruin these figs because they really have a habit of splitting. So let's cut these open and see what we're looking at. Oh man, they definitely needed another 2 days. This was way too early. This one looks a little bit better. However, any fig is better than no fig at all. So I'll try one of the riper ones. I'm definitely a little off my game when it comes to picking figs, but we'll get better. Very nice, very refreshing, very sweet. It definitely could have used another day, possibly 2. We'll try this one, but I think this one's going to be a lot less ripe. This one definitely needed another day or 2, but it's still better than almost any fig I've gotten at a grocery store. But we have to get the official taste tester involved. Dale, want to try a fig? Come. And Dale, the official taste tester, has come running to try his first fig of the year. Dale, can you give us a shake? Very good. Dale, down. Very good. It was very good, buddy. What do you think of that fig, Mr. Handsome? What do you think? He said it's good, but he's going to go back to his bed and start playing with his toy. And that, growers, is a tour of every single fig variety in my entire collection. I sure hope you enjoyed the tour, because I just checked my weather station and it is almost 108 degrees Fahrenheit on the heat index right now, and I really need a break. In the meantime, if you have any questions about any of the figs that I am growing, please ask them down in the comments and I will try to respond with the best knowledge that I possibly can give you and my personal experience. So if you'd like to know anything more about these varieties, please feel free to ask. In the meantime, if you did enjoy the video, please make sure to hit the like button, and if you haven't already subscribed to the channel, please subscribe for future updates and more videos like these. If you're curious about any of the products that I use in my garden, especially the fertilizers that I use that I believe are so important to my success growing figs, check them out in my Amazon storefront, linked in the video description. If you're interested in any channel related merchandise, anything featuring the channel's logo or my best buddy Dale, please also check the video description for a link to my spread shop. Thank you all again so much for watching, and I hope to see all of you again on the next video.